Good afternoon. Good. Okay, we wanted to make sure we were doing a count to make sure we had quorum. So I'm going to call the meeting to order at 1:03. My name is Marlo Lemon, and I am the Commission Chair. I want to say Happy New Year to everyone, and thank you for your flexibility in having afternoon meetings as we gear up for this legislative session. I want to personally thank each of you for your hard work and dedication on this commission, so much as to where DORS sits as a state agency. What I want to see from the commission members is how we support DORS with recommendations that increase communication between their partners, LEAs, DDA, labor, and most importantly, families and youth with disabilities. So how do we make it easier for families to get connected to DORS? How do we streamline the agency linkages? How do we improve DORS customer service? And how do we make it easier for families to understand what DORS has to offer? In other words, how do we better serve Maryland families, youth, and adults with disabilities? This commission continues to meet through March of 2023. These meetings will focus on the topics that have not yet been covered, as well as readdressing any other topics that require additional discussion. The commission will submit its final report to the General Assembly by March 15th of 2023. So again, I thank you, and we're going to turn it over to Scott to start topic 7.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. And again, I want to echo Ms. Lemon's opening comments concerning the commission and its focus. And today's topics are going to cover topics 7 and 8, which topic 7 deals with whether the Division of Rehabilitation Services should continue to be a division of the Maryland State Department of Education or be transferred to another state agency. And commission topic number 8, if the commission determines that the Division of Rehabilitation Services should continue to be a division of the State Department of Education, or whether the Division of Rehabilitation Services should be governed by a board separate from the State Board of Education. This is one, these topics are just 2 of the 10. If you recall, we covered a number of topics prior to the submission of the interim report. And so these are, we've got topics 7 and 8, which have has a particular focus. And then topic 10, which is any additional recommendations the commission may have as a result of these meetings. The reason why topics 7 and 8 are being really combined, because from a federal perspective, the commission, the placement of a VR program is really the governance of the VR program really doesn't matter to the federal government, but it's really dealing with the governance. And these two particular topics actually deal with governance. So that's the reason why we have combined them. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. And again, just a recap of why we're here. Again, House Bill 6. There are 10 topics. I'm not going to go through them other than say, again, today's topics we'll be covering are number 7 and number 8. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so to kind of give you an overview of the placements of VR agencies across the nation, reached out to the Rehab Services Administration and Technical Assistance Centers to kind of find out where agencies are located across the nation. They came back with a sort of a grouping. And so we're going to kind of review that first at a national level, and then we'll kind of dig into sort of the details for each type of groups and give you an idea of a specific, we'll spotlight a specific state and kind of how their governance plays out for that particular agency.
Scott, 1 second. Lillian has her hand up. I'm
Sure.
sorry. Lillian?
You're on mute, Lillian.
There you go.
Thank you for recognizing me. Mine is just a process question, and it's a quick one, and that has to do with the interim report and the final report. And that is, when the final report is written, will that be combined with the interim report and a comprehensive report be submitted, or is that going to be a second report altogether? And the reason I ask is because I have read the interim report and actually have made some suggestions, some revisions for stronger read, and whoever wrote it, kudos to you for the hard work in doing so. But if that report is done and it'll, will not revisit it again, then I simply need to know that, because then I will not submit my suggestions, and we'll move on, and I won't lose sleep over that, but I just needed to know.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, the final report is a continuation of the interim report, so your input is welcome.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So, here we go. Okay. Again, from a national perspective, 22 agencies around the country are placed within larger state agencies, which in federal terms are called designated state agencies, or DSAs. They're located, typically located under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Acts, with their other co-titles of Title I, II, and III. And so all 4 titles are under one particular agency. Typically across the country, these state agencies are the Department of Commerce, Economics, Labor, or the Department of Workforce Development. Here's an example of some of the states. Again, it's not a comprehensive list, but we wanted to kind of give you an idea of how the various states look and so forth. In the case where you see the word general, if we kind of go back to our first presentation, and we talked about how state agencies are broken up, the federal law allows for 3 types of agents. In this case, we've got Delaware General and New Jersey General. That's what that means. All the other states that you see listed here with no other designation means that they're a combined state agency. Okay. There are 20 agencies in which which are housed in a rehabilitative focused agency or an independent agency. Here are a list of those, again, cross-section across the country. And as you can see, this is one where we have, quite a few agencies that are strictly blind agencies. Also, we have a number of agencies that are housed in social services or human services or health services. Again, broad spectrum of the state agencies are located within those type of organizations. There are 10 programs that are focused within predominantly education agencies. You can see Florida Blind, Iowa General, Maryland, Mississippi, and New York. There are 5 VR agencies that focus on providing services to disabilities. In this case, Connecticut and Oklahoma. And there's only one agency under federal law that's allowed to report directly to the governor, and that's American Samoa. And just for the record, that's about 10 people. So, we'll kind of get into a little bit of a state by state, using those big, those broad categories. And we'll spotlight specific state agencies and some of the performance and governances that they have. Okay, in order to kind of compare numbers and figures and so forth, I focused on two primary areas. And so each state that you'll see presented today will have either one or the other type of similarities to Maryland. Either the state population is similar to ours, or their federal VR grant is similar to ours. And so you can, again, get some frame of reference. The only exclusion to this is Virginia, and we're going to use that sort of as a regional comparison as what happens in the Mid-Atlantic area. So to kind of give you guys an idea, we'll start with Maryland. Kind of, again, some of this stuff you guys have already seen in some of our previous presentations, but we'll kind of go through it again just to kind of refresh everybody's memory. Again, state population is about 6.1. We're overseen by the Maryland State Department of Education. Again, we're considered a combined agency. Our federal funding for FY22 is $48.6 million. When we add that, we kind of divide our population, and it gives us a per person funding of about $7.97 per person. Our federal match requirement for Maryland is $13,159,985. Order selection. We are in order selection. We do have the Senate. The state superintendent for the Maryland State Department, the Senate. The state superintendent for the Maryland State Department of Education is appointed by the state board. The vocational rehabilitation program is under the superintendent and under the deputy superintendent for organizational effectiveness. In addition, the vocational rehabilitation program in this state is also responsible for the disability determination services. Next. Kind of give you some idea of the number of individuals we serve in a given year. In program year 19, and let me just kind of refresh everybody's memory, going back to, I think, the first or the second presentation. A program here is based on WIOA. And so for 2019, that's really starts July 1 of 2019 and runs through June 30th of 2020. So it's kind of the reverse. If you're familiar with state fiscal years, it's kind of the reverse of a state fiscal year. So in 2019, we had 21,419 individuals. In 2020, we had 18,190. In 2021, 17,928. Now these are strictly VR clients. This doesn't include those individuals who are receiving pre-employment transitioning services, because that's not included in our counts when it comes to providing VR services. Our source for these numbers here is the ETA 9169 report, and this is an annual performance report that every state agency has to submit each year. So that way, again, we're using the same reporting structure. Total number of clients employed second quarter after exiting the program. Again, this is one of the key indicators that we have that we're held accountable for. So in 2019, we had 1,488 individuals. And 2020, we had 1,798. And 2021, 1,410. In program year 20, 97% of the individuals who were employed were individuals with the most significant disability. So now we'll take a look at Wisconsin. Again, Wisconsin was one of those states that early on, we kind of compared ourselves to, dealing with, again, in this case, the population. The vocational rehabilitation program is housed in the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development. The VR program is one of 6 different divisions that department oversees. The VR program in Wisconsin is also a combined program. In 2022, they received $66,303,000. Federal funding per person, $11.23. State match is $17,944,870. Training, employment, and pre-employment transitioning services. The rehab vocational program does not manage the disability determination services. That's managed by another state agency. Okay, totals. In 2019, they served 28,201 individuals. 2020, they served 25,530 individuals. In 2021, 25,775. Total number of individuals that were employed second quarter after exit was 4,123. 2020, 3,627. In 2021, 3,467. In PY 20, 46% of the individuals that went into employment in a competitive integrated setting were considered most significant compared to Maryland's at 97. Missouri. Missouri is a state where the general agency is housed within the educational agency. Missouri has a blind and a general agency. The blind agency is housed in the Department of Social Services. They have a population of 6.1, basically the same as Maryland. Missouri receives $76,518,479. The general agency receives $66,571,000. The blind agency receives $9,947,000. The federal funding per person between the two agencies is $12.54. The state match, and again, for state match, this is combined between the general and the blind agency. So there, as long as the state meets that requirement, the state will receive its full funding. If one of the two agencies falls short of what is deemed sort of their state match, but the other agency is able to make up for it, it doesn't matter as long as the state total matches that figure. They are in order of selection. Category 1 and 2 are open. Category 3 is closed. They do not have a wait list. I could only get the information on the general agency. The general agency has 130 VR counselors, and the data for the blind agency is not publicly available, so I was not able to include that. So obviously they have more VR counselors than we do. Missouri Department of Education, elementary and secondary education is overseen by the state board. The state board in Missouri has 8 members, selected by the governor and approved by the Senate. The Commissioner of Education is appointed, and they call their superintendent a commissioner. As we kind of go along here, you'll hear different titles. A lot of times they really mean the same thing. So it's the Commissioner of Education is appointed by the state board. The VR program, the general program is under the Deputy Commissioner for Learning Services. In 2027, in 2020, they served 24,223, and 2021, 23,348. Number of individuals employed second quarter after exit, 5,006. 2020, 4,583. In 2021, 4,138. In PY20, in performance year 20, 54% of the individuals who are employed in competitive integrated setting were considered individuals with the most significant disability, compared to what Maryland is at 97. Oklahoma. The Oklahoma VR program is within a disability agency. Oklahoma has a population of 4.1 million. It is overseen by the vocational rehabilitation, by the Department of Rehabilitation Services. The vocational rehabilitation program is one of 6 programs within the Department of Rehabilitation Services. It is a combined program. They receive funding of $53,494,000. Similar in this case, where Oklahoma was selected because, again, funding was not that different. Even though it's higher, it's not that much different. Federal funding per person is $13.04. Their match requirement is $14,478,000. Order selection, they are in. Categories 1 and 2 and 3 are open, but they do have a wait list of 585. Again, their number of counselors is not publicly available, so I wasn't able to provide that information. The Department of Rehabilitation Services is overseen by 3 commissioners. Each is appointed by either the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the President of the Senate. Those 3 individuals then select and appoint an executive director. That executive director is responsible for the following program: the General Rehabilitation Program itself, service for the blind and visually impaired, which includes not only the VR program, which is as well as the Independent Living Older Blind program, but also the Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. So even though Maryland, we do have a separate office for the blindness and vision services, it is focused strictly on the vocational rehabilitation services as well as Independent Living Older Blind. Oklahoma also oversees the Disability Determination Service, as well as the Oklahoma School for the Blind and the Oklahoma School for the Deaf is under this program. So the total number of VR clients served in the program year in 2019, 10,465. In 2020, 10,006. In 2021, 11,315. Program year, as far as individuals employed second quarter after exit, 19 they had 1,246. 2020, 1,401. In 2021, 1,099. In PY20, 44%, $75. General agency receives $42 million of that. Blind agency receives $8 million. Federal funding per person is $7.17. State match is $13,580. They have no order selection. They have no wait list. The general program has 160 VR counselors. The data on the blind agency was not publicly available. But I do want to go back up to that little asterisk talking about no order selection. The general agency was about to go into order selection when the state stepped in and provided them $10 million above their match requirement to prevent the program from going into order selection. The governance of the Massachusetts. There is no governing board. The agency reports to the governor. both the vocational rehabilitation programs, that's Massachusetts Commission, Rehab Commission and the Massachusetts Rehab Commission for the Blind, are both housed in the Department of Health and Human Services. Both VOR programs are of 2 of 12 agencies overseen by the Department of Health and Human Services. The Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services is appointed by the Governor and approved by the Senate. The commissioners of both the Massachusetts Rehab Commission and the Massachusetts Commission for Blind are appointed by the Secretary of Health with the approval of the Governor. So their figures. In 2019, they served 29,963 individuals. 2020, they served 29,383. In 2021, 26,922. Number of individuals employed second quarter after exit, 4,670. 2020, 3,667. And 2021, 3,341. In PY20, 59% of the individuals were employed in a competitive integrated setting. Next. Okay, Mississippi. Mississippi is in fact its own standalone agency. They have a state population of 2.9 million. Vocational is a combined agency. They received total funding in 22 of $48,272,648. Federal funding per person, $16.42. Order select, their match requirement is $13,064,897. They are in order selection, but all categories are open. They have no wait list, and unfortunately, their number of VR counselors was not publicly available. In Mississippi, the Department of Rehabilitation is governed by an eight-member board. One is an appointee of the governor. The other is the superintendent of education. The other is the executive director of mental health. There is a representative of 16,162 individuals. 2020, 15,081. In 21, 15,446 individuals. Individuals exiting, employed second quarter after exit, 2,201. In 19, 2,455 in 2020, and 2,188 in 21. In PY20, 14% of the individuals who were employed in a competitive integrated setting were considered to be most significantly disabled. So we'll move on to regional comparisons. The state population, we're going to use Virginia. Virginia has a population of 8.6 million. Virginia has a general and combined agency. Both of the agencies are housed within the Department of Health and Human Resources. Virginia received 81 million in federal funding. The general agency received 70 million. The blind agency received 10. Their federal funding per person was $9.36. State match requirement in Virginia is $21,993,867. They're in order selection. All three categories are open, and they don't have a wait list, and their number of VR counselors is not publicly available. There is no governing board. It reports to the governor. Both VR agencies are overseen by the Virginia Department of Health and Human Resources. The two VR agencies are 2 of 12 agencies overseen by the Department of Health and Human Services, Human Resources. The Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Resources is appointed by the governor and approved by the General Assembly. The commissioners of the Department of Aging and Rehabilitation Services and the Virginia Department of Blind and Visually Impaired are appointed by the governor and confirmed by the General Assembly. The term of the commissioner for each one of those agencies coincides with the term of the governor, and in Virginia, the governor's term is only 4 years. They cannot have a second term. So the numbers in Virginia, PY 19, 21,789, PY 20, 20,887, and 21, 22,642. Total number of clients exiting after this second quarter in employment, 3,072. In 2020, 2,649. In 2021, 2,544. In PY 20, 95% of the individuals who are employed in the competitive integrated setting were considered to be most significantly disabled, which is comparable to Maryland. So that's sort of the overview of everybody, you know, kind of where agencies stand within the larger, what they call designated state agencies. So at this point in time, we kind of open it up for discussion and let you all ask questions, and we'll try to answer them best we can. And then we can kind of discuss topics for...
As we were going through it, and Maryland, of that list, is the only state where whites are the minority in the state. Other states, whites are the predominant majority, overwhelming majority. Mm-hmm. So it's not a question, just a comment.
Thank you. In the chat, Ellen, her question is, how does DORS fare in the new governor's budget? Does the governor's office know about our preliminary recommendation about the DORS budget? Has anyone been able to answer my question about whether DORS will benefit from the funds allotted for implementation of the current commission's recommendation?
Well, I can't answer, I think Dr. Lawson was going to look into that. I can't answer the question on the Kerwin Commission. I can certainly answer the commission's, the question on the governor's budget, since the governor's budget came out on Friday. So now we have some numbers. Yes, MSCE was able to get our grant raised based off of what we think our new budget figure will be for 2024. If I take we take our current grant, increase it by 8%. Take a look at the match requirement. We are above our match requirement, and so forth. So MSDE was able to get the additional funding into our budget for this go around. I know there is work being done on the recommendation as far as future funding beyond 2024, but we can at least say for 2024 there is money in there to meet our requirements for that budget.
So just as a follow-up,
Sure, Ellen.
so there's someone in the governor's office who's involved in advocating for the new budget, who is aware of our interim recommendations that impact DORS's budget. Is that correct?
Well, I would say, I'm going to say the Department of Budget and Management, which represents the governor, is clearly aware of it, because that's how we were able to get the additional funds. MSD had to go in and advocate for those additional funds, and so since I'm not a part of those budget discussions, I'm a little leery to kind of get into any type of detail other than the fact that we got the money, so obviously MSDE made the case enough for Department of Budget and Management, who is overseen directly by the governor's office, and had those funds increased to.
Scott, I think it is important to note that we are in the midst of a transition, and so there
Yeah.
is some staff turnover at this time. So this is not the best.
Yeah.
There's a significant amount of turnover across a variety of positions, so this is a very unique point in time, so.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
thanks.
I don't know that it's reflective of the priority, but just the transition, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. The new governor came in on a Wednesday and he released a new budget on a Friday. And as he's getting his people in place, because again, some of this, you've got people who kind of are holdovers from the Hogan administration because of their familiarity with the budget process and what went into it.
Department of Budget and Management, and I am certain that they are aware of our priorities. But I would be hesitant to say exactly what is occurring within the new governor's office right now at this point in time.
May I do one other follow-up? There's a huge influx of money that I think, and of course I have not seen the governor's budget, but I've been reading about it and hearing about it, for the Blueprint for Excellence, the Kerwin Commission's recommendations. And those recommendations fit neatly into what we're doing on this commission, because they talk about the future of youth and being career ready and employment ready. So I am hoping that someone is looking at how that huge influx of funds can assist the clients who are being served by DORS.
Thank you. We have another question, and if we have iPhone, we're not quite sure of who.
Oh, that's me, sorry.
Oh, okay.
So sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. So what percent of Maryland's 97 are DD eligible?
So I just, and just for context, I'm thinking back to the presentation that we had about the DDA and the DORS numbers, and it was only a low percentage of individuals from DDA that were being referred over. And then it was like, I think 65% I calculated that had individual plans for employment, but weren't actually receiving services. So I'm trying to figure out, are there more people with DD who aren't showing up in this 97%, or B, or a combination of things, is the fact that 65% of those folks are showing up in your numbers served, but aren't actually, because they have an individual plan for employment, but they're not actually receiving services, which then skews the data. So I'm just trying to figure out, what does that 97% look like? Are they primarily DD eligible? Because then some of the activities and systems changes may look different than.
The 97% are individuals who went to work. In other words, they left the agency in employment. So,
Okay. Oh, okay.
it's not, so they were categorized, so they could be blind, deaf, mental illness, other cognitive disabilities, physical disabilities. So they were classified as individuals with the most significant disability.
So that's the outcome.
So that's the outcome.
Back
So
to the number
97%
DR
of,
clients.
right,
Okay.
so 97% of the individuals who leave in employment are classified as individuals with the most significantly disabled.
Okay.
And yeah, some of them could have been, would have been DD, but I do not know what that number we'd have to go back and look at what it was in 2020.
So follow-up question, and again, math and percentages. I capped out at 5th grade math. So I kudos, the 97%, kudos, that's awesome, right? But I guess my question is, with the others.
Category 1 open.
Right,
Category 1 open,
right,
which means they're serving most significant, and non-severe.
Right.
So 46% of them are individuals with the most significance. That difference is that 54%, if I do my math quickly here, would be individuals who consider significant disabilities or non-severe. What the breakout is of that, I don't know, because
Right.
I'm getting information from using the 9/11 data from RSA and what they gave me. So, but it's just, it's, more it's really sort of what their focus is. I mean, because you kind of take a look at Mississippi. Here you got an agency that serves nothing, it's strictly a VR agency, and that's all they serve. Only 14% of their individuals are individuals with the most significant disabilities. So some of it has to do with, where they're putting their focus and where they're putting their energy, I guess is my point on this. Is that-
Oh, okay. I'm like, because we have a really large waiting list, right? So, I mean, again, kudos to the 97%. Please don't want to take anything away from that, but I'm looking at the comparable other states and like, no waiting list, all categories are open, or a very, very, very small waiting list. So I was trying to like go, are these really I was trying to figure out, are they really apple to apples numbers? So that it's useful information, but I think like to Eugene's point, right? Maryland is an incredibly diverse state, so I think we need to sometimes maybe take a little bit of a grain of salt with some of these numbers, and hope I'm making sense.
I'd go a step further, because I know that Wisconsin actually has tried to keep more categories open because they were able to get better outcomes the broader the pool of individuals. So
Gotcha.
So that's been part of their strategy, is because we know that we can get the outcomes, and sometimes they can get better employment outcomes for category 2 versus category 3. So,
Gotcha.
So there is some, the devil is in the details. as
Gotcha.
everyone-
Right.
Yeah,
And
okay,
that's-
thank
and
you,
that-
thank you.
And that, Jade, you actually speak to my point, you did a little bit more eloquently than I did, of where you put your focus
Right, right.
is, who are you trying to focus on? And again, this is why I kind of go back to why I've always advocated, or I will continue to advocate, you ought to order selection. You never want to get rid of it, because you don't want your hard-earned VR dollars going for somebody who needs a pair of glasses or wrist rest for carpal tunnel or stuff like that. That's not what the state does. Again, this is my own personal opinion, I'm sorry. It should be for those individuals who have a significant or most significant disabilities. That's where the focus really needs to be. And by having really your non-severe areas open, I think it kind of dilutes the work.
And I hear you, right? But as a family serving organization for the state of Maryland, I agree, but I hear you about the glasses, but when we've got large populations of families with youth that are leaving school with nothing.
We have 2 questions. The first one is, what benefits would DORS clients receive from moving DORS to Department of Health, or having DORS be an independent agency? So that's the first question.
I'm not sure I could even answer that. I mean, to be honest with you.
So Scott, I actually had, I get that wrong all the time. I think it's less about sort of where,
Right.
and more about what place, where will issues and concerns such as staffing and funding be most likely to be prioritized, and where will the greatest amount of funds be invested in services and innovation, like directly and so forth. So to my mind, it's not sort of well, this place versus this place. It's here are the things that we need to see more of. We need to see more of this information being made available. We need to see leadership. I don't know how often the State Board of Education gets updates from you, to what degree, so where is the place that DORS is going to be, and that's nothing against MSDE, right? Education is a priority, and how do you deal with competing priorities, right? Because we're not saying that education isn't important, but the way that the system works, you have to sort of prioritize amongst things. So which place is going to be the place that DORS will get the most support for increased funding for staffing and all of these pieces? So that to me is the question before the group with these questions.
And Stephanie had a similar, she said, how would moving DORS to the Department of Labor change DORS staffing patterns, and what impact would it have to how DORS works with partnering with other agencies, if any? And so we can address that, and then Megan had her hand up.
So Scott, I think one of the things that we are, before the commission is concluded, we can share some information with the commission about what the current state superintendent has done in order to not only increase funding for DORS, but also to increase the number of VR counselors and those individuals who actually provide services to individuals throughout the state. I think that is very important, and I think we can also share information about the cost, and we're going to include that in another presentation. So we will be able to share additional information with the commission.
I just wanted to sort of respectfully disagree with the statement that it's more about what steps can be done to, I want to try and make sure I'm not misstating, but essentially I want to disagree and say I think it's incredibly important where the Division of Rehabilitative Services is housed. And I think talking through what Ellen's been asking, what Stephanie was asking is very important. I think there is a huge difference between having Division of Rehabilitative Services at the Department of Education that thinks about education and educational services, the Department of Labor that thinks about employment and employment services, or the Department of Health, where this is just my personal opinion, I worry that we would get into like disability as a condition more than like the employment side of things. I think, and again, just personal preference, in order to form my recommendation about topic number 7 in particular, I really need to hear more about logistically the connections that MSDE has, the services that can be provided, versus something like Department of Labor. And if, I understand if the commission as a whole wants to also consider health, I was just sort of offering my 2 cents on that. But like I said, I think it does make a big difference when we're looking at competitive integrated employment, who we have and what knowledge and expertise and connections they have.
I definitely hear what you're saying, and, DORS has, Scott, how long has DORS been a part of MSDE?
Over 90 years.
And for over 90 years, we have, and definitely in the time since the new superintendent come in, focus on exactly what you're saying as far as what it is, what services that we can provide for clients, what services we can provide in the community, what funding can we advocate for, what positions can we advocate for, what increase in salaries can we advocate for, so that we can not only retain but hire quality VR counselors and other staff. So yes, it is true that we are the Department of Education, but DORS is a part of the Department of Education, and the focus is not on just education, but client services as well. And especially now with Mr. Chudry being the state superintendent, that has been the focus since day one when he came into the office.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of give you an idea of what he's focused on. I mean, we literally do meet on a regular basis. I mean, if I'm not meeting with him personally on a weekly basis, I'm at least providing him updates as to what is going on, what are we doing, what areas are we improving in, what areas do we need support in. So these are all the things that, yes, as Dr. Lawson said, yeah, we're the Department of Education, but he is very much laser focused on this division and making sure that it's the best division of rehabilitation services in the country. I mean, he flat out told me that's what he wanted in our first meeting. And we started discussing what the issues were, which is why we got the pay raise, because we were losing staff left and right, and that became his focus.
We have a comment. Important to keep in mind, labor employment work is locally controlled versus the state through the American Job Centers, so it might not translate in the same way. And so Alan?
So, our actual topic for today is, and we have to, it's our obligation as commission members to thoroughly discuss the different options.
Yes.
And so Department of Labor is one, Department of Health is one, becoming an independent agency is another one. There may be others that I'm not thinking of. Theoretically, Department of Health could seamlessly work on the employment issues because they've got, the Developmental Disabilities Administration, the Behavioral Health Administration, and so making any recommendations right now, because I haven't heard much discussion about what that might look in Maryland. So I would like us to have a full discussion of the different options, and there may be others that I didn't mention that I haven't thought of.
Okay. Megan and then Jade.
Nope, Alan said it better than I could, so just ditto.
Thanks, Megan. Jade.
So in the spirit of transparency, we have looked at this off and on throughout the state. MDOD looked at this as an option and having it moved over to MDOD. And I don't think that you can separate sort of the what and the why, right? Because you have to know what it is that another agency is going to give that education can't give to be able to make the why. And you have to understand the nature of those different agencies, because I think that one of the challenges that comes in is the way that the process works is, priorities get set by secretaries and budgets and so forth based on staffing. And so you have to make trade-offs, right? If you're the Secretary of Health and COVID comes along, I can tell you the other work fell by the wayside. I mean, not to the same degree, but it was not the priority. It was not the focus. The same thing with education. How do these places interrelate? With labor, because I've done the analysis of where the agency sits. A lot of rehab agencies have moved out of education. I think it would be interesting to see from other states what their motivation was. But I also know that other states' labor agencies don't function with the local control the way that Maryland does. And you have to understand that local control, and it's not unlike education, right? But the local school systems have a lot of power and control in Maryland, so we have to figure out how to navigate that. Same thing with labor, right? So even if DORS goes over to labor, it's not going to be a line by line, okay, now the DORS counselors can be working with the folks that are doing workforce development for the general population. The monies go to the local America's Job Centers. They set their priorities, and you still have to sort of coordinate, collaborate, and so forth. So some of it is understanding the different agencies, and that's where I feel like if we know what it is that we feel like DORS needs, then we can have a discussion about which place is going to be the best place to ensure that DORS gets those things and retains those things, whether Chowdhury leaves or whatever changes occur. I mean, to my mind, I want to see DORS and this information that should have seen the light of day much earlier out on a consistent basis. You know, what is this process and where are we always going to ensure that we know that DORS has significant staffing needs that aren't being met, that DORS has significant funding needs that aren't being met, you know, and then figure out which place is the place that I think is going to be able to provide that, and to elevate those issues and to keep it at the forefront and never have to feel like they have to make hard decisions between DORS, which is important, versus another issue that is equally important. It's just the nature of the way that the state works, and I think
Of that, I just would like to have a robust discussion because I can tell you, this is my 45th year as an attorney in Maryland, and I was an assistant attorney general for 10 of those years. And and I'm also just trying to be kind and thoughtful here, but it was not always apparent to me what benefit DORS clients received from being housed at MSDE. And I'm not meaning that in any way to diminish MSDE. It just wasn't clear to me, given the many times when the IEPT meetings participants would say, oh, we can't, DORS isn't going to show up until senior year. Oh, you can call them, but they're not going to come. You know, they were just, I mean, I'm just sharing, and I'm delighted that it gets better. And I think absolutely we have to talk about how to sustain beyond any superintendent or any secretary of whatever department DORS is in, their tenure, so that but I think our recommendations from the interim report were pretty strong in addressing a lot of the points that you raised. So thank you for listening.
Okay. Is there any other comments or concerns we need to be looking at?
So curious, because I hear you, Alan, right? Because we hear those comments all the time from families, right? DORS isn't going to show up until blah, 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 right? Which I think we've addressed that a lot, right? We've really brought that out. Lots of communication, lots of things that can be worked on in MSDE, or if DORS moves someplace else. And I think the other piece is we now have kind of had this great, robust conversation in the previous meetings, and then these are things to go, okay, well, say we make the recommendation that DORS moves to labor. I'm just picking labor, right? How are we going to make sure these same issues don't occur, right? Because people are people and communication is communication. So I think all of that stuff has to be factored in when we're thinking about that. But I wonder, for the purpose of the commission, if it would be helpful, not trying to make more work on y'all, I promise, those VR agencies that have recently or fairly recently moved out of the State Department of Education, to Jade's point, okay, why'd you do it? Right? What worked? What didn't work? Because if we're going to make that kind of a recommendation, I think these are I'd love to learn from somebody else's mistakes, right? Or if they said, hey, we moved and boy, we wished we hadn't, right? Because I will tell you right now, from the Parents Place of Maryland's perspective, when we talk to families about the American Job Centers, they go, huh? They don't, so there's still that breakdown in communication. They don't know, and it frustrates the American Job Center folks, trust me, because they want to be, you know, they want to get kids employed with disabilities as well. So I just wonder if there's a really small of those states that have fairly recently done this. I think that would help me to hear from other states, because I don't have a crystal ball.
Look at differently if they had to do it again.
Does the governing board have to be under MSDE, or can it also be freestanding?
Well, a governing board, just in general, it can be freestanding, it could be under MSDE. The requirements, if you guys took a look at sort of the fact sheet that went out Saturday morning about the governance of the VR agency itself, as long as those stipulations are met, then again, it's why you see VR agencies all over the place. Department of Health, Department of Labor's, workforce developments, educational agencies, within other disability-related agencies as well. So, that's the key component, is those requirements have to be met by the VR agency and by the DSA. Again, there has to be a state director. That state director has to be in control over the personnel piece of it. They have to be over control of the budget and how those monies are expended and so forth. So those are just, some of the things that have to be in place regardless of the structure.
Could we also get some information on what the fiscal impact would be? Because I know that was one of the issues and concerns with moving it over to MDOD, is that it would have it would require some additional costs and so forth. So I'd be curious to know if there's any of that data, what the fiscal impact would be, wherever it would go.
Yeah, we can, I'm working with the National Technical Assistance Centers, so yeah, I've already asked for assistance for this process, and so that we can certainly get some of that we can try to get some of that information on what it has cost agencies.
And I
Would we also,
wonder, oh, I'm sorry, Ellen, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just going to ask, could we also get input from Superintendent Chowdhury? I'd love to hear what his thoughts are. I appreciate them being shared, but it would be nice to hear directly from him, whether it's at a meeting or in writing. Now that he seems to be more engaged, it would be great to have his input.
Oh, absolutely. I think that I can speak to Mr. Chowdhury and get him to really be at our next meeting to share his thoughts and ideas and what he has already put into place. As I have said, no superintendent, well, I've only been here through 2, no one, let me just put it this way, no one has placed as much time, energy, and effort into gaining an understanding of what the Division of Rehabilitation Services is really all about than Mr. Chowdhury. No one has said that there will be weekly meetings with the Assistant State Superintendent for DORS and himself. No one has pushed for increase in salaries so that we will have additional VR counselors. To stress that number 10 of the required topics is any other improvements to the Division of Rehabilitation Services programs and services the Commission considers appropriate. So we have to look at that as well.
Ellen said that's a wonderful idea. Is that Megan? Yeah. Megan, go ahead.
I just wanted to add on number 10, and sorry if I'm jumping off before we're done, but it sounds like for the most part we just need to collect more information before we can continue discussing these topics. And while we're collecting information and sort of liaising with other states, I would like us as a commission to consider the Client Assistance Program, which is currently operated by the Division of Rehabilitation Services. And the Client Assistance Program is to advise and inform people with disabilities about their rights and help address concerns and conduct appeals of VR decisions. So I know from being at Disability Rights Maryland that of the 57 client assistance programs, only 3 are operated by the state VR agency. It's us, Nebraska, and North Carolina. And when we're talking about states that have recently moved DORS to another, or their rehab services to another state agency or independent, I know a number of the client assistance programs have recently been moved from the VR agency to independent or to a nonprofit, like the protection and advocacies agencies. And so when we're looking at ways of improving, I'd like to look at that under item number 10.
Okay, thank you. We have made a note of it. Renee?
As we're gathering that information, I think in full transparency, based on what I've been hearing folks to say, is if when we're asking these other states, if it's possible to actually maybe have 1 or 2 here. So, because it may be such a robust conversation, there may be questions we go, oh, we didn't think about that, right? And don't want to have to send us, like, you've collected the information, we have questions, and then we got to go back again. So if there's any way possible, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll see
Thank
if
you.
there's any, obviously you need some of the state directors and so forth, or some of the key individuals who are involved in it, so I can find out if any of them are still available, still around, and so forth.
This is one topic, or 2 topics it seems like we need more information on.
Is there anything else so here, again, just kind of going through my notes, and again, what is the benefits of either moving to labor or health? But realistically, I think probably what, before that, it's really learning what it takes to move an agency from where it is now to the benefits, the upsides, the downsides, the cost involved.
I'm reading this should have a governing board separate from the State Board of Education. If somebody could, I just am ignorant on that.
Okay.
Scott, would that be something that we could come back once we gain more information? Because I think that would be key, ensuring that.
Yeah.
Could,
Yeah, Ellen, just to answer, right at the moment, there is only one state that has anything similar to what's in the legislation, and it's the Arkansas Commission for the Blind. And taking a look at that governance, it really it appears that it's more of the state rehab council for that agency versus a true board. But I'll see if I can get some information a little bit. But when I took a look at it, to try to find out information about that particular topic, and that was the only agency that the Rehab Services Administration pointed to. That was sort of how it appeared when I took a look at their meeting notes and so forth, that they were really more the State Rehab Council.
Thank you, because I was having a hard time kind of
Yeah.
getting the arms around topic number 8.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest, so did I, which is why I went to take a look at it and kind of delve into that, and that was sort of my takeaway. But I'll try to take a look at that a little bit more further.
And
Thank you so
Megan has just brought up, moving forth, I'm assuming, moving forth, would love to talk through specifically how can we ensure that the changes we are recommending are implemented and that these conversations are happening regularly. I would agree with considering all sides when to relocate a service. So it sounds as if everyone, wants the conversations to continue and that we need more information. Jade.
Could I'd like to charge all of the commission members with sort of going back through all of the really robust information that Scott has presented and highlight what information we think should be, updated annually and so forth, so that we really have a list of things that, and then we can figure out sort of what the right mechanism is. But I have found that there's a lot of really critical information that I think that the general public needs to know, in order to be advocating on DORS's behalf and so forth. And I'd be curious to see what other folks, all of the information, what they thought was the most helpful and interesting that we might want to see on an annual basis as a report. That's just my thought about it. So.
Yeah, and I mean, the other area is we do have the State Rehabilitation Council that, again, is in charge of providing, guidance and input and so forth. I will throw this out. I do have a couple of openings still on my council, so I'll take a second of public services here real quick. That's all our organizations. The Parent Advocacy Group is one of them. Individuals from the state special ed department is one of them. The Client Assistance Program is one of them. The State Independent Living Council has a representative. So we have about 15 members on the council at the moment. I'm still looking for a few more. We have several members who represent the DD community, looking for people who represent the behavioral health side. We have individuals who are blind, need to get individuals who are deaf, and so forth, and underserved populations as well, Hispanic community, Asian community, so forth. But it all needs to be individuals who are focused on disability issues.
Megan,
Scott.
go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to ask that. Do you know if Disability Rights Maryland applied to be on the commission last spring?
Who?
Do you have record of whether I never heard back about that?
I
I know it's an application to the governor. I just don't know if you.
Megan, in all honesty, I didn't see anything come across my desk. That would, if you applied directly through the appointments office, they would have sent that information back to us. I can check to see where it was at.
Scott, with the new appointments office, I think that did they carry stuff over? I think folks are going to have to apply again with the new administration.
That's what I'll check with the appointments office, and Megan, I'll let you know.
Thanks. Okay.
And I want to capture Megan's, I think this goes with her addition to 10. Let me know, Megan, if it doesn't. And just to elaborate on my question about the Client Assistance Program, I like to hear about the number of appeals, hearings, before, after a move of the Client Assistance Program from within the state agency, and to take a look at how the CAP is serving DORS clients with that process.
Okay, I'll have to see of those agencies that have moved, whether their CAP program was internal or external prior to that move, and then see where they're at after the move. I mean, in some cases, if the CAP was already external and they moved, then there's really not anything to compare it to.
Just to clarify, it's not the move of of DORS from labor or ed to labor, wherever. I meant the move of the CAP, because I know there are a couple client assistance programs that have recently moved from VR to a protection and advocacy or something like that. And so that's the part I was trying to elaborate on. And so when the client assistance programs move, how does that affect?
Yeah, and Megan, if you have specific examples, I mean, I'd have to scour it.
I can get you a list, and I can touch base with where the client assistance program is now through the PNA network.
Yeah, but we need to know where it was. I mean, if you know which ones were in the VR program and have recently moved, then if you could send me that information, we can certainly see, you know, what the numbers were before and after.
I think it needs to be pushed out beyond the State Rehabilitation Council, maybe using enhanced communication strategies. And Jade, you have a question?
Yeah, so a process question.
Who made the comments about, made notes around the interim report. I think that would be really nice if we could, because luckily you're able to share, again, my apologies, share your comments so they can be incorporated into the final report. So that would be lovely, but we do understand writing at the 11th hour.
Yes. And I think one thing we have to be cognizant of is when we have to have the final report submitted. So, you know, definitely we will incorporate as much as we can. We really want to hear from you. That's why we extended the time for the report to be submitted, but we will have to make sure that for the interim report was submitted, but we have to make sure that we meet the deadline for the final report.
Well, and could we, if not that, is there a process whereby folks can submit written comments that then can be shared with the group? I'm just trying to figure out how to capture particularly the voices of individuals who weren't able to be here, and so forth. So I don't know, some sort of process that then, you know, comments get submitted in, they get pushed back out for us to review and then sort of flag and say, yeah, you know, this sounds like something we need to.
Yeah, I mean, if you have comments about the interim report, you can certainly send them forward and we can take a look at them.
I agree. If, you know, comments about interim report, and then we'll move forward for the final.
Lillian just said she made the comments on the interim report, definitely contains the bulk of the information, and she is encouraging that there is value in reading it. So Scott mentioned to Lillian, at least for the interim report, for her to get her comments in writing. So that's one part of the process. Ellen says, thank you so much for your time and work on the interim report. Maine, Wisconsin, and South Carolina. Maine.
Thanks, Megan.
Oh.
I sending it to you.
Okay.
The last comment was Megan just getting Scott the information that he asked for. Maine, Wisconsin, and South Carolina have all moved their client assistance program within the last 5 years. Thank
Thanks.
you. Are there any additional, I know it sounds like we need more information, but any additional comments on topics 7 and 8?
Just, that was Lillian that made the comments on the interim report.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Well, if there's no additional comments,
The value of time.
we're going to give you, looks like we're going to give you back a little bit of your time today. We really appreciate it. And again, a lot of the topics for the next time, we will definitely be reaching out to some of my colleagues around the states that have moved, and we'll get some of that information so we have a lot more detail. But we wanted to, this time, to kind of, again, just kind of give you guys an overview where agencies were, and then give you guys time just to kind of do what we did today, just have a discussion. So we appreciate it, and thank you again. We appreciate your time and all your input into this process, and have a great remainder of your day.
Thank you.
Very, very worthwhile discussion and initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.